My life as a Mafia boss. Rain crashes against the windows of my penthouse apartment. It's 3:14 a.m. The city below me never sleeps. Sirens scream through the streets while black SUVs glide through the rain like ghosts. My phone vibrates once on the marble table beside me. One message appears on the screen. Your uncle is dead. I stare at the words for a few seconds longer than normal. Not because I'm shocked, but because deep down, I always knew this day was coming. I slowly stand from my leather chair and walk toward the giant glass window overlooking the city skyline. My hands rest behind my back as thunder rumbles across the dark sky. The empire is mine now, and every enemy in the city already knows it. I wasn't born rich. People think Mafia families raise their children inside giant mansions surrounded by money, bodyguards, and luxury cars, but that only comes after the bloodshed. Before all of that comes survival. I grew up inside a tiny apartment above my father's butcher shop. The walls smelled like cigarettes and old wood. Arguments echoed through the building almost every night, and my mother barely slept. My father barely smiled. But people feared him. Even as a child, I noticed it. Men twice his size lowered their eyes whenever he entered a room. Store owners shook his hand nervously. Police officers looked the other way when he drove past. At 7 years old, I finally asked my mother the question I had been thinking about for months. What does Dad actually do? She froze for a moment before quietly replying, "He protects people." I believed her for a while. When I turned 12, my father finally took me with him one rainy night. He gave no explanation and asked no questions. He simply looked at me and said, "Get in the car." I sat silently in the back seat of a black Mercedes while rain hammered against the windows. My father drove through the city with one hand on the wheel and the other resting calmly near the gear stick. Neither of you spoke the entire journey. Eventually, the car stopped outside an expensive Italian restaurant glowing under golden lights. Men in dark suits stood outside smoking cigars while quietly watching the street. My father grabbed your shoulder before you stepped out of the vehicle. "Watch everything. Speak to nobody." Inside, the atmosphere felt strange. Nobody laughed naturally. Nobody relaxed. Fear floated invisibly through the room. Then I saw him, my uncle, the real boss. Gold ring, tailored suit, cold eyes. The entire restaurant stood up the moment he entered. That was the first time I truly understood power. Not money, not muscles, power. The ability to control every person in a room without raising my voice. My uncle sat beside me slowly and looked directly into my eyes before asking, "Do you know what the most dangerous thing in this world is?" I shook my head nervously. He leaned closer. "A man with nothing left to lose." At 16 years old, I stopped being a child forever. I was driving through the city late at night with my cousin Marco when he suddenly parked outside an abandoned warehouse near the docks. I looked at him in confusion. "Why are we here?" Marco calmly opened the glove box and pulled out a pistol. My stomach dropped instantly. "There's a rat inside," he said quietly. I stared at him. "A rat?" "He talked to the police." My chest tightened immediately. Every instinct inside of me wanted to leave, but instead, I followed him through the warehouse doors. The building smelled like rust, gasoline, and rainwater. In the middle of the room sat a man tied to a chair. The moment he saw Marco, panic flooded his face. "I swear I didn't say anything!" Marco ignored him completely. Then he slowly handed me the gun. My entire body froze. "If you want respect," Marco whispered, "earn it." My hands trembled violently while the man continued begging for his life. "You wanted someone to stop this. I wanted someone to tell me this was all a test, but nobody was coming. This was the life I was born into. And in this world, hesitation gets people killed." The gun felt heavier than concrete in my hands. The crying grew louder. My breathing became shallow. Then finally, I pulled the trigger. Silence. My ears rang violently while smoke drifted through the cold air. Marco placed his hand on my shoulder and smiled proudly. "Now you're family." After that night, everything changed. The older men began respecting me differently. Small jobs became bigger jobs. Collecting debts turned into handling meetings, watching territories, and managing money. Cash flooded into my life faster than I ever imagined possible. By 19, I owned my first Rolex. By 20, I moved my mother into a luxury apartment overlooking the city. By 21, people feared my name before they even met me. But power changes people slowly. Then all at once, I stopped trusting anyone completely. I stopped sleeping properly. Every conversation became a calculation, and every friendship felt temporary. I even started checking mirrors before entering elevators. Paranoia becomes survival when everybody wants my position. Then came Sophia. I met her at a rooftop party high above the city skyline. Unlike everybody else, she didn't seem impressed by my money or reputation. That was exactly what caught my attention. Most people became nervous around me instantly, but she looked directly into my eyes and calmly said, "You look lonely." Nobody had ever said that to me before, especially not someone beautiful. For the first time in years, I felt normal again. I spent nights together driving through empty streets at 2 a.m., eating inside private restaurants, and talking about escaping the city one day. Around her, I almost forgot what I was becoming. But Mafia life destroys soft things, love included. One night, my men burst into your office holding photographs. My blood ran cold the moment I saw them. Sophia was sitting with federal agents, crying. My chest tightened painfully, not because she betrayed me, but because deep down, part of me understood why. Nobody survives this world clean forever. After my uncle died, the city exploded into chaos. Rival families sensed weakness instantly. Businesses were burned down overnight. Warehouses got robbed. People disappeared without explanation. Then came the assassination attempt. I was leaving a nightclub at 1:43 a.m. when gunshots tore through the street. My bodyguards shoved me behind a black SUV while bullets shattered windows around me. People screamed while cars crashed trying to escape. Beside me, one of my closest friends collapsed onto the pavement covered in blood. My ears rang violently again, just like they did inside that warehouse years earlier. Only this time, I wasn't scared. I was angry, and angry men with power are dangerous. By sunrise, war had officially begun. The final meeting happened inside the same Italian restaurant where I first met my uncle as a child. Only trusted captains were invited. Cigarette smoke filled the room, while expensive whiskey sat untouched on the tables. Everyone waited silently as I walked toward the head chair, my uncle's chair. Some respected me, some secretly hated me. But tonight, none of that mattered. I sat down slowly and looked around the room before finally speaking. Power belongs to whoever is willing to take it. Nobody argued, because deep down, they already knew. The city had a new boss, me. People think becoming powerful feels amazing. Sometimes it does. Private jets, penthouses, luxury watches, VIP treatment everywhere. But nobody talks about the loneliness, the fear, the sleepless nights. I stopped trusting compliments. I stopped believing promises. Even family dinners started feeling dangerous. Eventually, betrayal arrived exactly where it always does in my world. Close, very close. One rainy night, Marco walked quietly into my office. Your cousin, your brother, the man who handed you your first gun. But something felt wrong instantly. His eyes looked heavy. Guilty. There's a price on your head, he whispered. Silence filled the room. Who? You asked coldly. Marco looked away before answering. The family. My stomach dropped instantly. Not rivals, not police. My own people. Some believed I had become too powerful, too reckless, too difficult to control. And in Mafia history, powerful men rarely die peacefully. I stared at Marco carefully. Why are you telling me this? His eyes filled with guilt. Because you're still my family. That night, I understood the truth. Either disappear forever or strike first. At 4 a.m., black SUVs rolled silently through the sleeping city while my most loyal men sat armed beside me. Nobody spoke during the drive. The tension alone felt alive. The final meeting took place inside the restaurant where my story truly began. The older bosses sat waiting for me beneath dim golden lights. Cold faces, expensive suits, dead eyes. One of them finally leaned forward. You've become a problem. I smiled slightly before replying, no, I became the future. Seconds later, the room exploded into chaos. Gunshots echoed through the restaurant while glass shattered across the floor. Screams filled the air as tables flipped over and smoke consumed the room. And when the violence finally ended, only one side remained standing. Mine. Weeks later, I stand alone on my penthouse balcony overlooking the city once again. Rain falls across the skyline while distant sirens echo below. The Empire survived. I survived. But victory feels emptier than expected. My phone vibrates again beside me. Another problem, another enemy, another war beginning somewhere in the shadows. Because in my world, peace never lasts forever. I stare silently across the glowing city before finally whispering the words my uncle once taught me long ago. Power doesn't change people. It reveals them.